Has actually made a disaster of my kitchen. That's okay, because I'm gonna have super awesome heart. Here is the right and left ventricles. It's drying right now. It's a little bit bumpy, so I'm gonna have to go over it and dap with all-purpose acrylic latex plus silicone. So let's try this one now. Okay, that should be enough for our purposes. Okay, so now I've mixed up this silicone and kind of looks pinkish, so I'm not sure I'm going to go with this route, but let's give it a shot anyway and see how it turns out. I'm going to put it on a piece of dry clay just to see if it's going to have the effect that we need in terms of peeling off once we're finished. So here's a dry piece of clay, and we're just going to spread it on there like so. And like I said, this should come out clear when we're finished. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, so time will tell. Oop. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay. That's much better. Much better than where we were. Okay, so now we're going to work on the right atrium. Let's see. It's pretty much where we need it to be in terms of width. So I'm not going to worry about that. What I'm going to worry about is bringing it down some from here. It needs to go down a little bit more. I'm going to dip the paintbrush in the painter's cup, get a little bit of clay on there, and go over the ventricle. Try to smooth it out a little bit more than it is. I went over the ventricles with the watered down clay. It's looking a lot less bumpy than it was, and ventricles need a little bit more work, but I need to let that dry, that left one dry, before I go any further. Let it dry up a little, harden a little, and then go over it again for some fine tuning. The ventricles are looking a little lopsided, but they are a work in progress. So my heart is all dry. Unfortunately, it did crack in a couple places, and the reason for that is because I actually made the top of the ventricles and then cut it, and then later on went back to make a thicker layer of the ventricle. So now what we have to do is we have to work on the atriums. Atriums are proving to be a little bit more difficult. Okay, so now we have a problem because the atriums are a little bit wider than, well, a lot wider than they need to be. So they're not going to fit on there. Okay. And we're going to have to adjust this some. So the question is, what are we going to do first? Are we going to adjust the atriums first, or are we going to add the silicone first? If we mess around with this too much more, I feel like this is going to continue cracking as we move it. So I'm thinking it might be best to add the silicone to the ventricles and get that prepared so that that's ready before this starts falling apart.
Broken hearted, life's not over.
have one ventricle that's somewhat okay. And then the atrium still needs some work here. Right atrium. Left atrium is very challenging because this is actually not shaped like any of the other 3 chambers, so it's hard to make it uniform. Okay, so I think we're making progress here. This is a little bit more round, like it should be. And we have a nice right atrium. We're gonna have to go back in on the other side once it dries and once this bottom part dries. And we're gonna have to work on that left side a little bit more. But for right now, we're set. Okay, so after having heated this plastic tubing in order to make it more flexible, I found that it actually had the opposite effect and made it more likely to fold, which that's not going to help us. So back to square one with the ascending aorta. This is the right atrium, and it's a mold made out of clay and then dipped in wax, and then I put the silicone over it, and now that's going to come off because it is basically dried up. So this is going to be our right atrium. This is one of my ventricles, and I had to separate the chamber by sewing on another piece of silicone and sticking needles through it while I glue it with more silicone and let it dry. So now it's time to remove the needles and connect the 2 ventricles together. These nice valves, however, these valves are going to be a little bit too long. I'm going to have to cut them down, so that's what we're doing now. Ow, that's hot. I'm not really comfortable holding this too close to the blade because I prefer to keep my fingers. So trying to find some way to grip it while I hold it, and scissors are not the way to go because they're just not gripping well. So I'm going to try this clothespin and see if maybe I can do it like this. That seems like it might work. Let's give it a shot. Losing the grip. Okay, that's not going to work. Clearly that's not going to work. I'm going to have to find a different method, but for now we're going to say that I have all 4 valves cut down nicely. This has become a little bit better, and this is the valve that I got after having done this again, and this is the one before. This is my practice valve, I guess you could call it. And I have a new method that will be a little bit safer for my fingers, so I'll show you.
That's right, this has gotta be the greatest volume, pump up the volume, pump up the volume, dance, dance.
Okay.
Back to life, back to reality.